Great. Well, welcome everyone. We are here to talk about the DLO perk of the social media audit with Sarah. And she'll go over an overview of what that entails, and then we'll answer questions at the end. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to go over that with us. And I'll hand up the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Jessa. And hey, everyone, I'm so glad to see you all. Good to see you, Sheila. And I saw Angela in the chat there. Yeah, so glad to have everyone here. So for those of you who don't know me, especially for anybody who's listening to the recording later, I'm Sarah Benoit. I'm the co-founder and lead instructor of the JB Media Institute. And I just want to start by sharing a little bit about my background. I've been working in digital marketing since 2003. I started out in search engine optimization and quickly in 2004 and 2005 moved into working on social media. So a lot of times people think MySpace was the beginning, but actually there was a bunch of other sites before that, like Dig and Delicious and Stumble Upon. So I got to hop into the social media world really early in my career and have then had just the complete, I would say, pleasure and wild ride of watching that industry develop into what it is today, right? So if you'd asked me in 2004 if we would have something like Meta or X or TikTok, like I never would have believed we could have platforms with that many billions of people on them. So it's been this absolute kind of magical journey, I think, the last 20 years for me, watching this whole industry develop and watching the different ways that we can use the systems. I think one of the most powerful things that I want to just share with everybody that I've learned over 20 years is in the world of social media, we're all using the same tools, but we're not really ever using them exactly the same way. So this creates like an interesting issue when it comes to social media, because there is just so much possibility, so much opportunity, so many different ways to approach social media, so many different strategies. A lot of times people want me to give them the magic bullet or the secret sauce that's going to mean that they win on social media. And the truth is that everybody discovers that individually. Right? At the end of the day, the truth is some people are winning on Facebook, some people are not. Some people are winning on X, some people are not. Some people are really successful on TikTok, some people are not. So there's no kind of blanket formula that you can just apply to your situation. And at the same time, we are all using the same platforms, and there are best practices and there are ways of looking at the information and the data that is connected to your social media to really understand what your community and network is really about and what gets them excited, what gets them to engage, and what gets them to help you spread the word about your region and your area. So I think there's this really kind of big question in the social media world of how do we approach this when, like I said, we're all using the same tools and there's so many different ideas to share at the same time, though. Really, the formula for winning is very unique and individual. I think the core reason that that's true is because each one of you is connecting with a community of actual human beings and people, right? So every community is unique. Every person is a snowflake on one level, right? We are all the same, but we are all really individual. And so when we look at our regions, that becomes true too. So that's why I think sometimes what works in one region may work in another region, but when it's done slightly differently, right? Because it's being received by this really unique community. So I just wanted to lay that groundwork because I think that's a big part of how I approach social media auditing, which is to dig a little bit deeper into what your region is about, what your organization is doing, who your community is, what your actual goals are, how you define success on social media, rather than telling you what the answer to those questions are. So, I think that's a little bit different than maybe how we have done auditing in a variety of other parts of marketing in the past. So like auditing a website, I feel like sometimes is a little bit different. Whereas auditing social media, I really have to be open to the fact that it's not going to be as clear and cut and dry of what the answers are, or even what it is that we're looking at in the audit. We might change that up slightly depending on what it is that a region or a DMO or a TDA or TLA wants to accomplish. So for me, the next thing I wanted to just share is a little bit about my auditing process. Like I said, that sort of just lays the groundwork of how I approach these things. But I feel like the auditing process, which I've been doing for many, many years now, is pretty straightforward. I think, to just lay it out in a timeline pretty clearly, there's a beginning, sort of middle, and an end to the auditing process. And in the beginning, it's really, like I said, where I need each one of your organizations to take the time to sit with me for about an hour, to talk with me about the goals, to talk about what's been happening, and to give me access to all of your platforms. So I'll just put that as like kind of a step one for everyone. You have to be able to share access to all of your systems, right? So that I can get into the analytics. So some people are really organized on that level. Others, it's a little harder to figure out how to get things organized. That's why I like to have like an actual Zoom meeting together in the beginning, so I can actually look at the systems and I can help you figure out how to make sure I have access to everything. In addition to looking at your platforms, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, I'll also look at your Google Analytics if you're using that to track your website, because that analytical system gives me a lot of information about the relationship between the social media that you're doing and the website itself. And that's kind of another piece for me. When I look at social media, I really try not to put social media kind of in the corner as a separate thing. I really want to look at it as part of your overall communication system. So in that first meeting, we'll talk about social media and the platforms you're using and how they're doing, but I'll probably also have some questions about other types of digital marketing that you're doing, whether it's advertising, whether it's blogging, email newsletters, how you're using your website. We might have some conversations about that as well, because I think social media is most valuable when it's considered a part of like the whole ecosystem of what you do. And I think most people are there. It took I feel like almost a decade for everybody to see social media as something that was like integrally linked into all of their other channels. And so we'll look at it from that perspective. And then from there, once I get access to everything, I actually just dig into the data. I really try to look at each different platform to understand the platform itself. And I also really look at longer pieces of time frames. So 6 months, 12 months is what I'm trying to look at in order to get enough data to kind of see where are the trends, where can we learn from the information that we have. It's harder if you look at just 1 month to really understand the bigger picture. So we go back in time and we really try to dig into some of that stuff in detail. And the key things that I think I'm really looking for in the auditing, or what I call the auditing purpose, for most of the organizations I've worked with in the past, one, we're really trying to understand, like, let's take the temperature of the situation. What have we actually accomplished? What have we actually been able to do so far? What do we see is working and is providing some level of engagement or click through or excitement? I also like to dig in a little bit to really understanding, like I said, the relationship of all the platforms to the website. So some platforms are better at driving website traffic than others. So it's important to understand that, let's say Facebook, which is typically very good at driving website traffic, is really different than Instagram, which historically, if you're not paying for ads, is actually not a huge driver of website traffic sometimes. It's a driver of brand awareness, right? And so we try to really identify what are each of the platforms accomplishing, how do they relate to the overall goals of the organization. And then we really look at the content specifically and dig a little bit deeper into the content itself. So what content is really creating the result that you want, or getting somewhere close to that result? And what content is kind of not really meeting our needs or achieving our goals? And can we identify why those things are happening? So I kind of, start with that bigger view and then dig down until I'm really looking at almost every single post you've put up for the last, 6 months, and kind of looking at the data behind those things, which is pretty exciting. And then at the end of the process, typically what I'm going to do is we're going to gather back together and talk about what the findings are from the information and look at kind of an action list that I create, right? So that action list is basically around where do I think you have the most valuable opportunities? And usually from the first meeting to the last meeting, one of the things that I really work to connect between those 2 points is what can you actually realistically do? Right. So who's on staff? How much time do they have? I'm not going to give you a social media audit that suggests that you make 3 reels a week if I already know that there's nobody who has that capacity right now to do that. Right. And so I really have a heart towards, I don't want to give you a strategic document that is then something that sits on a shelf. Right. I really want to be able to come back around in that second meeting and say, here's the ideas. Let's talk about what's actionable. Let's think about maybe what phase 1, 2, and 3 could be, and look at even maybe the whole year going forward. If we can't do everything right now, where could we potentially launch that campaign or try that new type of content down the road so that it becomes something that's really doable. I feel like that's just something over the years of working with small businesses and especially working with a lot of rural DMOs. Really making sure that if you've got a marketing staff of 1 or 2 or 3, that we don't try to ask those people to do things when they've already got 8 hours a day or more of work going on. So how do we make this something that we can use and put in place, implement per se together, but also make sure that it's very realistic and that nobody walks away feeling like I just gave them a bunch of extra work that they don't have any time for. So that's where those 2 meetings kind of connect together once I've really looked at the data and pulled it together. And the last piece I'll add just about audits is, basically everybody's got different platforms that they're working on. I know I've talked to the Uplift team about, if you want to look at just Facebook, we could do that. If you want to look at Facebook and Instagram, I could do that. If you want to look at Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, I could do that. Of course, that adds to the time of what I'm doing, but I'm certainly glad to really accommodate where people are at and what they want to prioritize. Again, because some regions have all the channels running and they have lots of things they want to talk about. I know some regions, the truth is they've got 1 or 2 channels that are really the winners, and that's where they want to focus their energy, because the truth is they don't have the staff or the resources right now to be running 7 channels. So again, we'll sort of talk about that in the beginning to really identify what you want to take a look at. And I will throw out too, one of the other things that comes out of the auditing conversation a lot, especially with marketing teams and marketing professionals, is there may be things where you're interested in doing it, but you need to level up your skills. And that's where I have not only been training people on social media for like probably 18 years, but I have a ton of resources. So whether down the road you want to engage for some real training to help you learn how to use a tool better, whether that's Meta Business Suite or the advertising system or something like that, or you just want resources so you can go and explore that stuff yourself and dig in deeper. I have a lot of those things at my fingertips and can provide some direction there. But I want to open up for questions and just hear what you all have to say or things that you want to ask me. And like I said, I'm so glad to be here.